Hey class, Prof JC, and I gotta tell you, I'm really excited about this book that we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks. We may end up staying in this book quite a bit. It wasn't one of the required readings, so most of you probably did not get it. I recommend you get this book. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked, and more than 10 million copies sold worldwide. You probably have not heard of this book yet. But if you were to look up, if you were to Google or look up books on integrity, this is one of the first books that comes up with several different articles. I'd never heard of it, and so I decided to purchase it. And what's interesting is I'm listening to there's a guy that I listen to his podcast, and I love listening to him. He's an entrepreneur based out of Orlando, Florida, and he has these barbecue joints that he runs, and he's got a phenomenal podcast, and he's talked about this book before. So after I got the book, I heard him say it, so I said we definitely have to dive in. And I have to tell you this. So I'm kind of reading this along with you, right? I am learning as we go along. And the reason is this. You may be thinking, what does a book called The Courage to Be Disliked, and then the rest of the title is The Japanese Phenomenon that Shows You How to Change Your Life and Achieve Real Happiness. You could be asking, what does any of that have to do with integrity? And so we're going to look at that, okay? And I'll talk to you a little bit about that today. But one of the most important things that I just want to set the stage here as we talk over the next few weeks about this idea of integrity is that it's so much more than what we think when we think of the word integrity, right? Most of us think of integrity and we think, okay, that's a good thing. You know, to live with integrity, that's one of our goals because that's a good thing. People of integrity are good people, right? Integrity is a great virtue. It's a great value to have, to live with integrity. You know, lots of company values state integrity. Lots of company missions and visions talk about integrity, right? And so we've got this mindset around this word integrity, but I want to challenge you a little bit with this idea of integrity. And then the rest of our class will kind of flow out of what we talk about today, and defining what I believe based on reading, based on study, based on research, not just my own personal beliefs, but based on all of this, I believe the correct definition of integrity is what we're going to talk about today. So I've chosen this book, and there's a few others that we'll talk about, because my hope is that maybe this class will help all of us as we continue to try to live in integrity, to live with integrity, because it is an important thing, but maybe not for the reasons that you think it is, okay? So let's start today by just defining what integrity is, okay? If you were to look it up, if you were to Google integrity, here's probably what you would get. Integrity is a state of being whole or a state of being complete, okay? It is based on the word integer, okay? So if you go look up how this word came about, it's based on the word integer. And if you know about that word and you remember studying integers back in high school, right? Just that word gives me, chills. I was not a huge fan of high school math, but it's about wholeness and completeness, right? A whole number, right? And so when we think of integrity, I want you to change your mindset around, hey, this is a good thing, to saying, hey, it's not a good or bad thing, it just is. A person who lives with integrity is a person who lives with wholeness, with completeness, whatever that means, okay? So let me offer you a couple suggestions, right? A person who lives with integrity is a person who is living honestly their life. And when I say honestly, I don't mean that this is an honest person. I mean, it's a person who's living honestly from the inside out. What they are is what they show on the outside. So, if a person is well, here's the best example I can give. I'm trying to find examples, but here's a real life example that I can give, okay? One of the best human beings I've ever met in my entire life, I actually worked with him had a large nonprofit, and it was a faith-based nonprofit, a global one. If I mention the name, you would know what it is. And um, he was an atheist, actually. He wasn't. There were some people at this, because this nonprofit in particular, uh, they, in certain roles, you had to be a person who was a faith-based person, a Christian person, actually, I would say. And in other roles, it wasn't a priority for them. And so he was in a role where you didn't necessarily have to be a Christian, obviously, because he was an atheist, and he was an outward atheist. But let me tell you what, this man was one of the best men I know. And here's one example. Okay. So we had a Christmas time come up, and there was some work to do in terms of packing a large truck filled with goods to take to children and families in the local area who needed toys and presents and this kind of stuff. Well, somebody had messed up, and so this truck was supposed to be packed maybe on the 20th or 21st of December, something like that. But it didn't happen. And so what happened was, on the 24th, the morning of the 24th, a call goes out, hey, we need to get this thing done because we need to get these toys and all this stuff. We need to get them to these families by the 25th. And what had happened was, the call didn't go out till late in the day, so the work actually didn't start getting done till Christmas Eve in the evening. I was one of the ones who got the call, and I don't know if I was out of town or whatever, but I did not show up for it. And I know several other people who were there, faith-based people, who didn't show up for it. Well, a group did show up for it, and the leader of that group was this gentleman that I'm talking to you about right now, an atheist. And I'll never forget when I heard that story about how he gave up his Christmas Eve night, and he had a family. He was married, he had kids. He gave it up so he could go. And it was stuff like this that began to change my mind around certain things, and be more open to people who may believe differently than I am. Okay. So if I'm honest with you, okay, and I think what happened, maybe I've kind of blocked this out of my mind. I'm pretty sure I was in town when it happened. I'm pretty sure I got the email, but I chose not to do it because we didn't have to. It was Christmas Eve. No one had to show up. And I chose not to because I didn't want to do it. It was Christmas Eve, which for me, Christmas Eve is my favorite night of the year. So I want to be with family, friends, whatever it is, but I don't want to be working and doing that. He chose to do that. And this is a person who, again, is not a Christian. In this situation, okay, which one do you believe? If we were to use the word integrity, and we were to make it a religious term, in that situation, you would have to say, well, the non-religious, the non-Christian person had more integrity than me. But in reality, both of us actually had integrity, but it shows something about our character. And I'm a little hesitant to talk about this because this shows you maybe a side of my character that I'm not necessarily proud of. We both lived out of integrity in our choices that night on Christmas Eve. The integrity that came out of him, wholeness, completeness, the right choice for him was to go and do the work. And he enjoyed it. And I remember he told me later, he said, you should have come. It was actually a really good time. It's Christmas time, all this. And I think, actually, I don't even remember what my Christmas Eve was that year, which probably means it wasn't that great. Now, this was many years ago. I don't want, this wasn't like last Christmas Eve. I want to put that caveat out. But what we saw was the integrity of two men, one an atheist who decided to go out and pack this truck or trucks, whatever it was, to get these stuff. And you saw a person who is a Christian, faith-based, who out of integrity decided not to go do that. So who's the good person in this situation, right? So this is how I want you to think. Integrity is not a good, bad thing. Oh, this person's not a Christian, so they must not have integrity. That has nothing to do with it. Okay. Integrity truly is living who we are, being who we are. I would say that I've met people in my life who have the most integrity, and they're probably not the nicest people. They're not the kindest people, but they are people who live out of exactly who they are. There's no fakeness about them. They are whole, they are complete. Okay. So here's a premise that I want to give to you. Okay. Happiness equals wholeness. Okay. Wholeness leads to happiness. So I want you, if you were, I want you to picture a circle, and on one side of the circle we've got happiness, on the other side of the circle we've got wholeness, and it's just this unbending circle. Okay, happiness, which I don't care what you say, all human beings are trying to live for happiness. You know, in whatever it is we're trying to do, we're trying to pursue happiness. Well, happiness equals wholeness, right? And I want you to think about the most happy times that you've experienced in your life. More than likely, there were times that you felt the most whole, times that you were with family, times you were with someone that you loved deeply, someone you cared about deeply, probably laughing. You were in the moment. You could sense it. Maybe it was a meal. It was a dinner time. You know, I don't know, whatever it was for you. I guarantee you it was a moment when you were the most whole, the most complete. I can think of one of the happiest times in my life. And I will tell you, in that moment, I was the most whole and complete person. Okay. And again, that's not a good or bad thing. It just means in that moment, I was complete whole. That led to a sense of happiness. Okay. So based on this book, and a lot of what I'm saying is based on this book. Okay. I'm just not going through and reading it because this book is um and again, I recommend that you get this. Just have it in your toolbox. Okay. This book is written in conversation form. So if I read it, I'm about to go back and forth and say who's saying who, and it gets a little bit confusing. But if you're reading it, okay, on the actual paper or Kindle or however you read things, it makes it a little bit easier. So I'm taking all of these ideas from this book here. Okay. So the book goes on to explain, well, what holds people back? If people are pursuing happiness, right, which is wholeness, so this is a life of integrity, what holds people back from wholeness, which then leads to happiness? Okay. And here's what the book would talk about: the beliefs and actions that keep us unchanged. Okay. This is what keeps us, from living in wholeness. So if wholeness means, I just want you to think about this yourself. What would your life look like if you were truly being a whole person? Okay. Truly whole, truly living outside of integrity, or not outside of it, truly living in integrity, with integrity, and you were a whole person. What would your life actually look like? Anything outside of that, okay, is going to bring a lack of happiness. Anything outside of that, I would say, is going to bring a lack of integrity. So what holds people back from wholeness, which then leads to happiness, that the book talks about, these are beliefs that keep us unchanged. So if we're living outside of integrity, we're living over here, or it's not a circle, it's something outside of that circle that I asked for you to form, okay? But what keeps us over there outside of integrity are beliefs in our minds that say that we can't change to become the kind of person that can live a complete whole life. So we continue to struggle in states of unwholeness. And so that circle we talked about, where it says wholeness leads to happiness, which leads to wholeness, which leads to more happiness, which leads to more wholeness and more, like that's the circle. That's the circle of integrity, if we call it that. The circle of a lack of integrity is this: if some of you are struggling and you're thinking, I'm not as happy as I want to be, more than likely there's a lack of wholeness in your life. So lack of wholeness leads to unhappiness, which leads to more lack of wholeness, which leads to unhappiness, which leads to more lack of wholeness. So let me give you an example of this, okay? When I think personally of integrity, probably one of the times in my life, and I've had many of these times, that I'm most integrity is when I'm near water. I love being on the water. I love being on the water. I love being in the water. I love being next to it. I don't care if it's a pool. I don't care if it's a bathtub. I don't care if it's a lake. I don't care if it's the ocean. I love water. I love drinking water, right? And so during COVID, if you remember, they shut down all the gyms. And I'm not a fitness buff or anything like that, but I go to the gym because it's good for my mental health. It's good for, I've wrestled with anxiety in my life, and I found, for me, one of the greatest cures, you get your butt on over there to LA Fitness. You get on the elliptical and you do 20 minutes there, and then you go pump out some iron, and it just helps all of that stuff kind of go away. That's for me. So I found that. But during COVID, they shut down all the gyms, and I remember thinking, this is the worst time to shut down the gyms. Are you kidding me? All of us locked in home with massive anxiety, and now you're taking away the one thing that many of us use to kind of get that out. So what I did, the one thing they didn't lock down were the waterways here in San Diego. They locked down all the beaches, if you remember that. You know, those of you who lived in San Diego during that time, but they didn't lock down the waterway. So I went over to Dick's Sporting Goods and I bought a kayak. And that became one of my favorite things. And I will tell you now the kayak is formed, and I actually have not kayaked this year. I've got goals to get back into it next year. This has just been a crazy busy year, so I haven't had the chance. But the times that I've remembered most where I think the best and I grow the most, and when I say growth, I mean mental growth, is when I'm on a kayak, because there's an exercise part of it, right? You're paddling and you're out there in the water. The sun beating down, which I love being inside the sun. You got all the water around you. And so I've learned even, last year, that when I take my kayak out, I would take out a journal and I would just go write. And if I'm trying to figure out something or trying to figure out a big problem, I would just write. And it was a time, those moments in my life are the time when I have the most integrity. Okay. So if that is most integrity, so that means there's sun, there's water, there's journaling, right? That means there's thinking going on there. For me, so you have to define what that looks like for you, right? When are you most whole? Okay. The times that so let's say I'm having a bad day and I choose to go do that. Okay. I'm having a hard time in life and I choose to go either to LA Fitness, or I choose to go get my kayak and put it out in the water, and I get near water, and that's whole. Okay. That's how I choose to. If I want to solve a problem, I have found that is the most healthy way to solve a problem. Now, if I'm living outside of integrity, here's what I do. Okay. So instead of doing this, which actually takes work, and you got to put on workout clothes, you got to get the kayak out, and you got to, it's a whole thing. You got to put it on top of the vehicle, and you got to drive down there and take it off the vehicle. And so it's not easy. An easy way to maybe, solve the problems is by going to sugar, going to carbs, too much to drink, right? Netflix, binging and just watching and just mindlessly watching hour after hour, right? When I do that, I feel completely out of integrity. And that is my circle of unhappiness, which leads to unwholeness, which leads to, right? And so at some point I have to break out of it and I say, okay, if I'm going to be in integrity in this moment, I'm going to solve the problem the right way. I've got to turn off the Netflix. Now, this is me. Okay. You're going to be different. I've got to turn off the Netflix. I've got to put the sugar and the carbs away, and I've got to go get out the kayak, or I've got to go suit up and put on the outfit, head on over or whatever it is. That's integrity. Okay. So I hope you're seeing that integrity is not a good or bad thing. It's just when you are most whole, which leads to happiness, that is the moment that you're living in most integrity. And so if you look at your life and net, you look at your life and you're saying there's a lot more unhappiness than there is happiness, then it could be because you were living a good part of your life outside of integrity. You got the wrong job. Okay. I'm not, look, I don't want to make this about me at all, but I will tell you, in most areas of my life, probably 90% of my life right now, I would say it's in integrity. I ran for years wanting to be a teacher or a professor. I came into this reluctantly. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why. Maybe I grew up in a family of educators and I've got that rebel spirit, and I thought I don't ever want to become like my family or like some of those people that I know in my family. But it's a call for me. And so I feel, when I'm over on the Point Loma campus, I'm in my office, I'm with students, I'm, at the Mission Valley campus, those are moments where I feel most integrity doing these kind of things, right? It's not as fun doing the online. It's a lot more fun to be in a classroom in person, kind of one-on-one, but I would say that I did things before this, jobs even, that most people would say, well, that's a good job. You're adding value to society. But even in those, I never felt right. Why? Because I was living outside of integrity. Okay. So why do people live outside of integrity? What this book talks a lot about here. Okay. He talked, and I'm actually kind of reading it through here, but I don't want to read it because it's just going to lead all over the place. But he talks about the importance of courage, right, in people wanting to change. But what keeps people from changing to live to live actually in integrity, it's the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So I just gave to you my example of what it means to live in integrity. You have to look at that for yourself. What does that mean for you to live integrity? What is a moment that you look at yourself and say, I have most integrity when I'm doing this? And then what are the moments when you feel when you were most outside of integrity, right? And here's the thing, oftentimes when people get in that cycle of unhappiness leading to lack of wholeness, unhappy leading to lack of wholeness, in that cycle of it, what happens there is people can't change because there's a story. This book would say there's a story that they're telling themselves. Okay. So this book is based on something called Adlerian psychology, right? So you've probably heard of Freud or Jung, right? Those Freudian, psychology. Jungi, it wouldn't be Jungi, Jung psychology, right? If you're a psychology major, you know what I'm talking about here. This Adlerian, I've never heard about this before, but here's something that he would go on to say. He would say this. Again, what keeps us stuck living outside of integrity is because we are telling ourselves stories that keep us outside. I can't change because of this. I can't change because of this, right? So maybe in my moments when I'm living outside of integrity, I'll say, I can't go kayak because I'm really tired. Or we will say, I can't, I can't go to the gym because my clothes are, I don't have any workout clothes that are, that are ready for me to go to the gym. I can't go to the gym today because it's a little cloudy outside, or I can't go to the kayaking because it's a little cloudy outside, or whatever. We tell ourselves things. Now, I'm giving some really simple examples, but the deeper ones are the addictions that maybe we have, or even, can I say, the anxiety that some of us, wrestle with. I do training all the time, and it is amazing to me with companies, Fortune 500 companies, small companies, all kinds of companies. It is amazing to me when we start talking about anxiety, how many people really feel and experience anxiety. But people will tell themselves, I can't change. So I'll stay on this thing over here. I'll do all these things over here, which keep me out of integrity because this is what I'm used to. And this is just how it is for me. This is how life goes for me, right? I have, there are stories I tell myself. I'm in a role now here at Point Loma where it's much more administrative. It's not just teaching. There's the dean aspect of it, and kind of helping to oversee our grad programs and working with our dean, the dean of the business school. And so in that role, there are a lot of details that come with it. And one of the things I've told myself for years is I've said, I am not a detail person. And there'd be times I would say it proudly. I am not a detailed person. Don't give me the details. I'm not a detailed person. But I've realized if I'm going to go to the next level in my life and career, not even just with my role at Point Loma and many other things, the details is where it's at. And so I've had to start telling myself, okay, in order to live a life of integrity, wholeness, happiness, right, I've got to become a detailed person. But if I keep saying things, well, I can't change because I'm just not detailed. I can't change because I'm ADD. That's the reason why I'm not a detailed person. I'm ADD. That's going to keep me living outside of integrity, which again is wholeness and happiness. And so what this book talks about here, the journey to integrity, which many people don't live because many people refuse to change, is he challenges and says, well, number one, life is not a narrative. So if we refuse to change because we say, hey, way over here, there's a trauma, and because of this trauma, I can't change over here, right? Or maybe years ago, I don't know, something with, like, if we go back to my lack of being detail oriented, years ago, I don't know, something happened with details, and so I stopped becoming detail oriented because of that. What he says is he would argue, Adlerian psychology would argue, life is not a narrative, right? So our lives are not determined by our experiences, but by the meaning that we give to them. So if I say that there was something over here, someone made fun of me for being detail oriented, someone called me a nerd. And so from that point on, I decided not to become detail oriented, right? And so I come all the way over here and I say, well, because of this right here, someone called me a nerd and that really hurt me, right? What he's saying is that doesn't affect what I'm doing over here. This is a whole different situation, but it's the meaning that I'm giving to that, which then impacts my actions over here. So whatever meaning I'm giving to that, right? That, okay, they said I'm a nerd, but wait a minute, that was back when I was, 19 years old. Why am I holding on to that way over here? Why am I letting my action over here be impacted by this over here? That's the meaning I'm giving to this. Well, I'm a nerd. That means I'm a nerd forever, right? Because this one person said I was a nerd, right? And so I'm giving you an example, but you can take that for whatever it is, right? And now again, I'm saying what the book is saying. I'm not trying to limit people in our lives and the trauma that we go through and trauma that we've been through. I'm not trying to limit that at all, but he's just giving another way of thinking about it. If we truly want to live in integrity, which is wholeness and happiness, it's the courage to say life may not be a narrative, that just because I face this thing back over here, it means that I can't change this over here, right? We've got to be able to break that and say, no, this thing happened over here, but this is today. This is age 19. Today I'm age 45. 25 years, 26 years, right? If I'm holding on to that and saying, I can't do this over here because of this over here, that doesn't make any sense. This thing doesn't exist anymore. So oftentimes we live out of integrity, which is again happiness, which leads to wholeness, which leads to happiness, which leads to wholeness, because of something that was said over here. We live out of integrity. The book talks about because of the story we tell ourselves that keeps us stuck. Okay. And again, this differs kind of from Freud. Freud would do this, and a lot of my own therapy, I've done quite a bit of therapy in my own life. A lot of my own therapy was kind of Freudian, and I definitely believe that there are moments we have to go back and look at things and try to heal that thing. Right? There's something that happened to us or something we caused maybe, and we got to go back and we've got to deal with that. 12 Steps does a lot of that as well. If any of you have any history with that, right? Go back and what's one of the steps? It's talking about going back to people. You have to make amends, right? So you're going back. So there is there is something to that. But if we keep ourselves stuck and living outside of integrity because of a story we tell us, that's on us. Okay. So he takes it even deeper than this, where he talks about the fact that we are living in line with some kind of goal, that whatever your life is right now, even if you say this is not the life I want, in all actuality, you are living in line with some kind of a goal. You may not know it, you may not understand it, right, consciously, but subconsciously, there's some kind of a goal that you're living with. So this is what Adlerian psychology, what this book would say, that whatever life you're living, and again, we're coming back to this idea of integrity. Whatever life you're living, if you're in integrity or outside of integrity, it's because you've chosen to do that. You are living according to some kind of a goal. And so that's the question. And when we get to our questions here in just a second, I'm going to ask you to think about that. If there are aspects of your life, right, that aren't where you want them to be, it's because of a goal that you've set. And you say, come on, JC, there's no chance. You might say, I'm struggling over here, or my business is struggling over here. In my business, I'm not making as many sales as I possibly want. You're telling me I'm setting goals to not make those sales? My growth in leadership isn't quite what I want it to be. You're telling me I'm setting goals to not be a good leader? Yes, I'm saying that. And I'm saying that the book would kind of lead us that way, right? To help us think from that perspective. That it may not be a stated goal. You haven't written down that I'm not going to make any sales. You haven't written down I'm not going to market my business. You haven't written down I'm not going to become a better leader. But there's some kind of goal unconsciously that is holding you back. There's something in there. Okay? And so I just want you to think about this. When we think about integrity, and again, we're going to spend a lot of time on this over the next few weeks. Integrity is not a good or bad thing. It just is. It's who you are. And you've got moments that you can look at your life and say, in these moments, I was the most happy, I was the most complete, I was the most whole. And I would argue those were the moments when you were living most in integrity. Okay. And so the goal is that those moments become greater and greater and greater. When your whole life, you can now say, I'm a person that is living inside of integrity. And this simply means I am being the person that I am. Okay. Now, I would add to this. Now, this is my faith background, and this is my optimistic background on the world, that when we are all living inside of integrity, this is how the world gets bigger, because every single one of us are living within our strengths, and we're living within those moments that bring, if I can use the word beauty, to life. Again, so I think of mine when I'm on the kayak, or I think of mine when I'm teaching. I think of moments for myself when I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to do some kind of corporate training. All of these moments, right? And these are all positive things. And when you bring your full self to the world, right, to the marketplace, whatever that is, the part of you that is most aligned inside of integrity, it's going to benefit the marketplace, right? Some of you are most alive when you're making sales. Some of you are most alive when you're leading other people and you're sitting and you're in a coaching conversation and you're helping. Some of you are most alive when you're writing. Some of you are most alive when you're creating some kind of a product or some kind of a new idea, some kind of a service, right? When you're innovating. And so the goal is to get you to live in integrity, which is to have more moments like this. I've said enough. I'm just so passionate about this today. I'm so passionate about this, and I hope you as well. Here are the questions I want you to answer. Number one, define integrity based on what we talked about in here. Don't give me your own definition. I will come through, because this has happened before, where I don't know if they're using Chat GPT or what, but they're writing out some definition idea. I will see your definition, and you're not going to get a good grade. Okay, you got to define integrity based on what I said, not what you're saying. Okay, because this definition is going to wrestle us through, and then after this class, you can change back to whatever definition of integrity you have. But I think my definition is correct, so I want you to use it. Okay, so that's number one, is define integrity based on what we talked about in this video. Number two, if there's an area, you know what? Number two, I'm going to change this. Number two, what is a moment in your life? Can you remember a moment or a time, a period or whatever, when you have lived most in integrity? And again, remember, okay, the definition of integrity, you're going to find that. And then I want you, when have you most lived there? I've explained it all through the video. I'm not going to re-explain that one again. Question number three. So there are 4 questions. Question number 3. If there's an area that you're living outside of integrity, what is the actual goal that you are living in line with? Okay, we talked about that already in there. Okay, there might be some goal, unstated, unconscious goal. So what is the goal? So I want you to think deeper about that. If you're living outside of integrity in any area, then that means you're living towards something. There's some kind of a goal that is actually pushing you forward in that area. So what is it? What is that area that's holding you back from living outside of integrity? And then our last question, if there's an area in which you are living outside of integrity, what is the possible story that you are telling yourself that is keeping you stuck? If you're living, that's the 4th question. If you're living outside of integrity, what is the possible story that you're telling yourself that is keeping yourself stuck? I'm really excited to dive into this. I'm excited for you to dive into this. I'm excited for you to reflect more on this. And I'm excited to be able to read your answers, and be able to see kind of what you're doing and kind of your own growth in this area of integrity. Okay, so feel free to, again, watch this video, take all the answers that you possibly can, answer these questions to the very best you can. I'm looking forward to reading them because of this, because I really believe that if we can get this thing right, okay, that you will come out of this program. My biggest dream for you, that yes, you're going to learn, whether you're the MBA program or you're in the MAOL program, that you'll come out of this program and you will know yourself better, and you'll be on the right path, on a path of integrity that will add value to the marketplace, to all of us out here. But we need the truest form of who you are. Thanks so much for listening today. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Take care.